Hi, I'm Chris. For those of you who don't know me, for those of you who do, that was completely pointless. I'm in day 3 right now of quarantine due to a lovely throat infection. Go me. At least it's not coronavirus, so I'm not going to complain too much. I've been spending a lot of time on social media, watching people post things about what to watch on Netflix, which I've done the same. I've actually been catching up on Stranger Things season 3. Don't know how I missed it. A couple of other shows that I'd like to catch up on, and other folks were talking about suggestions for books to read. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I have sort of a second career there as an author. Maybe I could get someone to read one of mine if they were interested. So I thought, well, okay, maybe if I read a couple of pages, this is completely unrehearsed. Usually when I do book signings, I'm rehearsed for 2 weeks up ahead of time. I'm not right now, so I'm hoping I don't flub this up too much, too badly. See, like I'm already doing. Yeah, that humanizes me, doesn't it? The book that I actually chose, this one right here, is called Falling Awake, and it's actually a very thin book. It's a novella. I started writing it my father's last year of life when he had Alzheimer's. I had stopped writing novels for quite a while because anyone who's a caregiver knows you are left at the end of the night completely just, you have no strength left. You don't want to stay awake. You don't want to watch television. You don't want to read. You sure as heck don't want to write. But I had a lot of plot ideas in my head, and I thought, well, what if I started to put them together? And I actually came up with the story. It was going to be a one off. Um, Readers responded to it so strongly, however, that there is a second book that came out a short time later. Well, about 2 years later, not really a short time. And I have a third book that'll be coming out in the series, hopefully in the next month or two, depending on how things go with the world. Right now, we'll find out. But I thought I'd read a couple pages, or at least give you a small sampler of what the story is like. And if you like it, it is available, I know, on Smashwords, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There's ebook versions of it. There's print copies, which is my preference. I'm not a huge ebook fan, but they sell. Not going to complain. The main character wakes up what he thinks is in an airport. He has no recollection of how he got there. He has no recollection of who he is, who he was, nothing at all whatsoever. And he finds a ticket in his back pocket with the name Daniel Davis written on it. So this takes up or starts off when he's in a local restroom there, and he's decided he's going to try and figure out what to do next. Daniel, he decided to call himself that for the time being, stepped over to a line of sinks, and stared into the mirror above the closest one. A pale face stared back at him. He guessed the age to be in his early 40s, due to some strands of white mixed in with light brown hair, the beginnings of lines around the eyes, a few creases in the forehead, and the hint of salt and pepper coloring in a day's growth of beard. What fascinated him most, though, were the eyes. They were a brilliant dark blue, but not cold, not like ice. There was a warmth in their depths. Weren't the eyes said to be the windows to the soul? If so, whose soul stared back at him? None of this was familiar. Daniel figured he'd remember his own eyes at the very least, only there weren't any memories associated with them. And the rest? He wasn't convinced any of it was his, not until he opened his mouth, blinked several times, and made a face or two. When the hell had he gotten so old? He couldn't even remember having lived, let alone lived long enough to be in his 40s. He assumed he must be in the prime of his life, not 2 decades past. Something caught his attention, and he made another face. Sure enough, there was a scar on his chin, an old one, slightly faded, but there nonetheless. It must have been from one hell of a cut, only he had no recollection of injuring himself. You've done what you can on your own. What's left? I need to find help. Daniel's brow furrowed at the sound of his own voice, and the sight of himself speaking. Maybe that was the disparity between how old he assumed he was before seeing his image, and the age on the face in the mirror's reflection. They were decades apart, but the voice speaking to him inside his head was far older than even someone in his 40s. He left the restroom and navigated his way through a stream of people until he stood in the middle of the corridor. The new location gave him a better vantage point to observe more than the one direction, to see signs for gates, see the gates themselves, and hopefully, maybe a security station. Technically, all he had to do was locate where people were entering the terminal, and he was sure to find someone there who could direct him to the nearest person who could help. No such luck. Not even a hint of where people were coming from. They were just there. Why not just ask someone passing by? Or, better yet, shout out loud until someone came by to see what the commotion was. They couldn't ignore him, could they? He just needed to make loud enough disturbance. No one can save us but ourselves. We must walk the path. Path? What path? And where exactly did this path lead? The corridor opened up into a much larger area a couple 100 feet away. A larger space had to indicate something, didn't it? He managed to fall into line behind two 70-ish women in the middle of a spirited conversation. The line of people approached the larger area and split up, half moving straight ahead and the other half moving off to the right. Daniel elected to go to the right and explore that area. Unfortunately, it narrowed back down a couple 100 feet into the same size corridor he just left, and signs along the walls indicated other gates ahead. There was no indication of people who worked there who might help direct him. No gate agents at any of the gates within sight, and still no security. How could an airport function without workers or security? Somebody had to have this. Oh my God, I can't believe I screwed that one up. Simple sentence. Somebody had to have circled the gate number on his ticket, unless he'd done it, but he didn't recall that either. Daniel stopped in his tracks and watched with growing panic while people simply moved to either side around him, not complaining or even admonishing him for blocking traffic. There was almost no reaction to him at all, aside from them moving out of his way, so they were seeing him. That, at least, was something. "This isn't right," he said, his voice wavering. Whatever calm he'd been able to summon after walking up abandoned him. His heart began to pound in his chest. What scared him the most wasn't the desire to flee, but rather not having any place he could see to flee. Signs for gates in all directions were it. Where was the exit? Where had he even entered? His vision blurred. Where was security? Where were the workers? Somebody had to make the gate announcement. Where was he? Sweat rolled down his face, and breathing grew difficult. Where could he get out? "Can I help you, sweetie?" Daniel spun to his right, desperate to find whoever had spoken, especially if he or she had even addressed him. Her voice isn't the one he remembered before waking up. Hers is different. A woman perhaps a decade or two older than himself stood in the entryway of what? Judging by the booths and chairs behind her, with place settings at the tables, it had to be some kind of restaurant. Odd there was no visible name for the place. The woman reached up and brushed a mixture of gray and black hair away from her eyes, then smiled at him. She wore a simple, light yellow short-sleeved top, white pants, and a light blue apron wrapped around her waist, a color scheme mirrored by the light yellow booths and chairs with white cushions and light blue tables. And while there still wasn't any indication as to the name of the restaurant anywhere on her uniform, a simple white name tag with black lettering identified her as Martha. "I don't," Daniel started, then stopped, his voice failing him. He looked at her, trying to use his eyes to plead and say everything he couldn't and was afraid to. "Please help me." So that's just a little bit in the first couple pages of Falling Awake. It does go on. You meet some, I hope, pretty interesting characters. There is a second book, sort of a prequel, and the third book will kind of finish up the story that this one starts to tell. So, like I said, if you're interested, it is on websites, Amazon, Smashwords, where you get your ebook stuff, but that I don't. Other than that, maybe if this goes over well, tomorrow I'll read a little bit from the second one, or maybe go back to some of the comedies I've written under the name Cage Allen many years back, and see where this goes. So I hope you're all staying healthy, social distancing, be good, hopefully take care of your families, hopefully they're taking care of you, and I'll see you tomorrow.